Good afternoon to you. 306 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up today, we're going to talk to an expert in ships, big ships, and what we just saw today in Baltimore. John Konrad is joining us with the website G Captain, covers this for a living. Jenny Terre will be with us at 4 o'clock. We talked to her about her experience on the border. So much chaos there. That continues. Sean Kennedy joins us at 4:30 as we discuss crime in Northern Virginia. You just heard Barbara talk about some awful, awful crimes committed in the state this past week, and they could have been avoided. We've got the information for you coming up. And Victor Davis Hanson is here with a big picture look at what's going on in the United States of America and what our future holds. That's at 5:30. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630 WMAL. Perhaps like you, I woke up this morning to the shocking imagery of the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore. Very early hours this morning, around 1:30. And as soon as I saw it, it was the Key Bridge, and it happened so early. The phrasing, "by the dawn's early light," started running through my head. But this collapse, I don't know. There's something so disturbing about it, obviously, and for our country, it's just a wreck. It's just a total wreck what happened today. As you get a container ship that runs directly into one of the support columns for the bridge, and the entire thing just collapses down into the water. You've got these videos directed at it. And as I was thinking about Francis Scott Key and Baltimore there, I started obviously piecing together the historical relevance of all of this, because Francis Scott Key was quite literally in the vicinity of where that bridge was standing, which was named after him. That's where he's believed to have been parked in the water at the moment. He was in British custody because he was negotiating the release of an American who was detained by the Brits then, and he went out in his own boat and met with the British warship. He was trying to negotiate that man's release. And they decided to detain him for a while because they believed that he had overheard their plans for the bombardment of Fort McHenry. And that battle ends up going on for more than 24 hours. And as it concludes, famously, Francis Scott Key sees Old Glory still flying above Fort McHenry. And that's, of course, the basis for the Star-Spangled Banner, his perspective there. So the bridge is considered to be kind of in the vicinity of where Francis Scott Key actually was. So unlike so many other things named after Francis Scott Key, that seems like a very relevant location. And so this morning, many of us wake up to this shocking video. And as I'm looking at the video on social media, I'm noticing a bunch of things. One, of course, you see the ship slowly drifting in, and all sorts of questions are running through my mind. How does a ship come that fast? They said that they were losing control of their thrusters. How does it keep going with such speed that it can actually knock the bridge over? You see the power fluctuate on the actual craft. And you also see the traffic coming across the bridge. And you see truck after truck after truck in some of these videos still traversing the bridge at around 1:30 in the morning. And obviously the traffic is much more sparse than you would see during daylight, much more sparse. And then the traffic slows to basically become non-existent just before the ship hits. And it seemed to me, at least this morning, that it was a small miracle that there wasn't more traffic on the bridge, at least visibly inside of the video. And we've come to find out that there's a reason for that. There's a reason there wasn't much traffic on the bridge, and it's that local authorities were given a mayday. The ship had called out a mayday and said they were heading towards the bridge, and they were concerned that they were going to make contact with it. And all of the local authorities, at least that are involved in this triage situation, began contacting the right people and asking the police officers on the highway to cut off traffic to the bridge, stop it, at least for now, because there's a ship that's reporting that it may actually be running into the bridge, and we need to stop everything right now. In fact, I've got the dispatch audio here for you. This is Maryland Transportation Authority Police Dispatch and response audio. This is from this morning. Take a listen to this. I'll play it in its entirety. It's just over 90 seconds long, but this is kind of how things were going. And you can hear as the cops say they were shutting down traffic on either side of the bridge. Take a listen.
I need one of you guys on the south side, one of you guys on the north side, hold all traffic on the Key Bridge. There's a ship approaching. It just lost their steering. So until you get that under control, we got to stop all traffic.
Yeah, I'm en route to the south side.
Dispatch start.
I'm holding traffic now. I was dragging, but we stopped prior to the bridge, so I'll have all outer loop traffic stopped.
10-4. Is there a crew working on the bridge right now?
291 to do that.
Good.
Want me to stop traffic on this site right now?
Yeah, if we can stop traffic, just make sure no one's on the bridge right now. I'm not sure where. There's a crew up there. You might want to notify whoever the foreman is, see if we can get them off the bridge temporarily.
10-4. Once the other unit gets here, I'll ride up on the bridge. I have all interloop traffic stopped at this time. Once you get here, I'll go grab the workers on the Key Bridge and then stop the outer loop.
C-13 dispatch, the whole bridge just fell down. Start, whoever, everybody. The whole bridge just collapsed.
10-4 dispatch is direct.
That's correct. This time.
Do we know if all traffic was stopped?
I can't get to the other side, sir. The bridge is down. We're going to have to get somebody on the other side, the Anne Arundel County MSP, to get up here and stop traffic coming northbound on the T Bridge.
C-13, I'm holding all traffic northbound.
And there you go. So I don't know what stands out to you in that. I mean, obviously the shock of the moment that an entire bridge of that size, one of the biggest bridges in the country, and one of the most important ports in the country, as that bridge collapses, what stands out to me is the composure of the men who are on that dispatch call, that they were able to maintain it in the face of such chaos, saying, it's time to mobilize everybody. The bridge has just collapsed. Now, at this hour, you may have heard at the top of the hour here on the news that 6 people are still missing, is what authorities are saying. And of course, this is a big multi-agency effort involving every level of government in the United States right now, and all sorts of specialists on scene. The most important phase right now at the beginning is just the search and rescue phase. See if they can find anybody who still might be down there in the chilly waters there. But beyond that, they've got to open up the passageway. They've got to remove the wreckage of the bridge to get the Port of Baltimore back open. As of today, the Port of Baltimore has suspended indefinitely its operations, at least for inbound and outbound ships. They were reporting this morning that truck traffic can continue to pick up goods at the Port of Baltimore that are already there and to move them out. But of course, ships are foreclosed from their ability to traverse in and out of the Port of Baltimore for now. And that's a big deal. That's a really big deal in the United States of America. This is an important port. In fact, the Port of Baltimore is the place through which 20% of all American coal exports flow. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, coal is the leading export commodity by tonnage at the Port of Baltimore, which is the nation's second largest coal export center after Norfolk, Virginia. In 2022, about a fifth of the nation's coal exports actually left through Baltimore. Steam coal, which is burned to generate electricity, accounted for almost 3/5 of Baltimore's coal exports, and metallurgical coal, which is used in steel making, made up the rest. So this is a really important port for the export of coal. It's also a really important port for importing a tremendous amount of goods, including if you've ever driven through Baltimore and ever looked out the window on the highway, you'll see just miles of new cars parked on parking lots having just arrived at the Port of Baltimore, set to be delivered all across the country. 847,000 cars and light trucks, more cars and light trucks than any other U.S. port in the entire country. 847,000 of them went through Baltimore last year. There's lots of foreign cargo, some 52 million tons of foreign cargo, $80 billion in value, which is a record. Prior to that, it was $74 billion in 2022. Lots of farm and construction machinery, 1.3 million tons of it last year, 1.1 million 20-foot equivalent unit containers That's a record. Last year, again, 11.7 million tons of general cargo tons as well. So there's a lot of important goods that travel through Baltimore. And of course, the city's economy, very reliant on the activity of the Port of Baltimore. All of that brought, at least for today, to a staggering halt. So we'll keep an eye on that, but that is a big deal. That's a really big deal. As for what exactly happened this morning, we're still waiting on investigators to give us all the specifics, but we're learning more and more by the hour. The ship is called the Dali, and it was destined for Sri Lanka. And as it was leaving the Port of Baltimore, apparently it had some issues with its thrusters, that things started not working. It was less than 30 minutes into a planned 27-day journey when the ship ran into the Francis Scott Key Bridge this morning. The ship, the New York Times reports, was sailing under a Singaporean flag, was on its way to Sri Lanka, was supposed to arrive there on April 22nd. The Dali is about 1,000 feet long. It left the Baltimore port around 1 a.m. Eastern Tuesday morning. The ship had 2 pilots on board, according to its owners, Grace Ocean Investment. ABC News reports that the ship, quote, lost propulsion. An unclassified Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency report, CISA, said that the container ship Dali, quote, lost propulsion as it was leaving port and warned Maryland officials of a possible collision. Actually, the word they use isn't allision. This is a new word to me, but if you're an expert in maritime terms, it's probably not a new word to you. A collision is when 2 moving objects strike each other. An allision, spelled with an A, is when a moving object strikes a stationary object. And so the report this morning is that there was an allision at the bridge, a maritime term that refers to an accident where a moving boat runs into a stationary bridge, for instance. So that's really the latest. And there's a lot of questions about, if you watch the video, you can kind of see the ship turning a bit as it heads towards the bridge. What is that? Everybody who's involved here is saying no reason to believe foul play. This looks like some sort of system failure, mechanical failure, and just an awful tragedy here. But I do have questions. I was listening this morning to our morning show, O'Connor and Company, and Hung Kao was on, candidate for Senate and a Navy captain, retired. And he was indicating that normally in circumstances like this, if you lose control of the ship, if you're not able to steer it, and especially when you're in the vicinity of creating that much trouble, like running into a bridge, you would probably throw the anchor down as a way just to get control of this thing. Lots of speculation running rampant right now online, including whether or not the anchor was dropped, and perhaps that accounts for why the ship began to swing. If you've ever thrown down an anchor in a current, you know what it does to a boat, and the boat kind of swings along the axis of the anchor line. Is that part of this? Lots of questions, not enough answers here, including, what's it going to take to recover these 6 still missing people? How long is it going to take to get a bridge rebuilt? You've got the Biden administration announcing today the federal government's going to do everything they can to foot every penny for the reconstruction here. And the big thing, of course, is how quickly can they cut through all the red tape to get a bridge rebuilt? That is absolutely critical to both the Northeast Corridor and to American business and our supply chains. So a big developing story. As the answers come in, we'll share them with you. John Konrad's going to join us here in just a couple of minutes. He knows a ton about this, and he knows a ton about what goes into these ships and how they operate, and will give us some of his expert perspective. Again, just moments away. Okay, real quick, some breaking news for you. RFK Jr. is speaking in Oakland, California. The Biden campaign is freaking out about his campaign. He's announcing his running mate literally as we speak live.
He has spent the last decade relying on neural networks, artificial intelligence, and cutting-edge science to identify abuses in our government. She understands that the health of every American is a national security issue and a national security risk. Her work has proven time and again that health drives our economy, that it is the foundation of our mental health, our national happiness, our ability to lead the world in innovation.
He's about to announce Nicole Shanahan, his Google co-founder, his ex-wife, the Google co-founder. That this is her, this is his ex-wife who he's tapping. She's got a lot of money.
My vice president is an avid surfer. who attended school on a softball scholarship. I wanted, right here in Oakland, I wanted someone who was battle-tested, able to withstand criticism and the controversy and all the defamations and slanders and perjuries that are thrown against anyone who embarks on a presidential campaign. I wanted an advocate who has seen...
He's talking a lot here. Sergey Brin is her husband's name, ex-husband.
Who shares my indignation about the way it allows regulated industries to commoditize our food, our wildlife, and our children. I wanted someone who would honor the traditions of our nation as a nation of immigrants, but
right.
who also...
I'm going to spare you the rest of this. A huge windup to announce that, the running mate here for RFK Jr. is Nicole Shanahan. The Biden campaign has launched a full-blown war room to attack him. In fact, you saw at the Biden White House just a couple weeks ago, he invited the entire Kennedy family except for RFK Jr. and then took pictures with them outside the White House. He's trying to fight back against this because they're very worried that the name Kennedy appearing on the ballot nationwide is going to result in some Democrats saying, I'd rather have one of those than one of these. Biden's just not working for me. So that's the breaking news at this hour. We've got a lot of it, don't we? Coming up, John Konrad is the CEO of G Captain, a fabulous maritime website. He's digging in today to what exactly happened in the port of Baltimore with that big container ship striking the Francis Scott Key Bridge and collapsing it entirely. The updates on that ahead. John Konrad, just after the news. Hey, good afternoon to you. 3:34 here, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we are making sense of the news. Coming up, Jenny Terre joins us. She's been doing a ton of border coverage for the New York Post. She joins us at 4 o'clock. Sean Kennedy is here at 4:30. We talk about what's going on in Northern Virginia, a lot of crime concerns there. And then at 5:30, Victor Davis Hanson is here with a big picture view of what's going on in the United States of America. You can join us, 888-630-9625. 888-630-WMAL. Authorities now say that there are 6 people still missing as a result of the collapse of the Francis Scott Key Bridge this morning in Baltimore. But what led up to that collapse? Why did a ship run into the bridge in the first place? For more on this subject, I want to bring in a guy who knows a lot about shipping and how these ships operate. John Konrad is here. He's the CEO of G Captain. He's a former drill ship captain and the author of Fire on the Horizon. He joins us now. Hello, John. Great to have you with us, sir.
Thank you for inviting me on.
It's our pleasure. So just give me your initial reaction. What did you think when you saw the video this morning? And why would a ship run into a bridge like this?
Well, I think my first reaction was what probably many of your listeners felt, that visceral reaction of, wow, this is bad. I replayed it multiple times, and it almost seemed unbelievable to me. But as you analyze the situation, certain problems emerge that bring it back into reality. This ship had left the terminal about an hour before, and it swung out past the nuclear ship Savannah and made a U-turn in the channel and headed towards the bridge at a speed of about 8 knots, which is about 9 miles an hour. And it looked like it was doing well. It was staying to the right of the channel as it approached the bridge. And then in the video, you see all the lights go out, showing that there was either a mechanical or electrical problem, a blackout on a ship. And when this happens on board a ship, the ship goes silent. It's one of those things that as a ship captain, you fear hearing. And it continues for a while. and it starts losing its heading. You see black smoke start billowing out of the stack, and the bow careens right into that post. And unfortunately, there wasn't much protection around this bridge column. So when the bow of that ship hit into the structural steel, the whole thing collapsed.
Yes. So when you say there's black smoke coming out of the stack, what does that indicate to you? What was happening at that moment?
Well, we're really not sure what's happening. And unfortunately, these reports through the NTSB, they've been delayed now. They usually now take over a year to get out. And by that time, the public's lost interest. And this is one of the reasons that problems aren't solved.
Right.
But there are a couple theories that you can take an educated guess. One is that the ship went into full reverse and put an enormous strain on the engine. When you put the strain on the engine, in order to slow down, two things happen. One is that propellers are designed to propel a ship straight ahead, but they're inefficient when they go in reverse. So you often have the stern kick out to the left and the bow kick out to the right. You could also put a strain on the electrical system. So that is one possibility. There's also a possibility with the environmental regulations. You have to burn cleaner diesel when you're in port. Mm-hmm. And when you leave port and you get out to open ocean, you can burn the dirtier diesel. You are supposed to wait until you get completely out of the port. But sometimes, the engine room crew wants to go to bed, or they prepare, or as you're just lining it up to prepare, they couldn't make a mistake. So there could be a human element to the story. They also, there could be these cruise ships are minimally manned. I mean, this ship is almost the size of an aircraft carrier, which has 5,000 people on. This ship had less than 25. So the computer systems in the engine room, the crew is tired. They want to get off early. The engine room goes unmanned at night. So it's possible that someone switched it to computer control, before, at an inopportune time. We don't know what happened exactly, but, we know that there was either mechanical or human error.
All right, I want to back up for a moment, just talk about the basics of ships like this. Is this a standard size container ship? Is this a kind of a normal size for a container ship? And how much weight and ultimately physical pressure are we talking about? This is a pretty big vessel to slam into a bridge.
Right. We saw the Ever Given get caught in the Suez Canal a few years ago, and then its sister ship get caught leaving Baltimore a few years ago. Those are mega ships that have 24,000 containers, TEUs on board. This one was a bit smaller. This one has a capacity for 10,000 TEUs, and it was carrying 4,600 TEUs. The total weight was 116,000 deadweight tons. So it's still a very, very sizable ship, not the mega ships that we saw clog the Suez Canal, but still really large vessel.
And when a ship like that leaves port, there's my understanding is there's a lot of safety procedures for how a ship both enters and exits a port. Did they receive assistance all the way up to the Francis Scott Key Bridge? Are there people helping them on their way out, or are they kind of on their own by the time they get to that point in the water?
Right. There's a vessel traffic service, which is like air traffic control, but there's a major difference. Air traffic control can order a pilot to change course or heading. The vessel traffic service is only an advisory service. So they advise the pilot, and it's up to the pilot and the captain on board to decide what they're going to do. There's the captain of the ship. He's ultimately responsible. And then there's another captain who's an American who's local to that port. And we were told there were two of these pilots on board at the time. And they're the real experts in the port and the facilities. And then the Coast Guard captain of the port is in charge of the regulations for that port. So the Coast Guard captain of the port will decide what safety procedures are needed for what ships. So someone made the decision that the ships could discharge the tugboats before the bridge. So when the power went out in the bridge, there was no backup. Those tugboats are incredible backup because they can slow the ship down and move its bow out. But without those tugs there was no alternative system to save it from running into the structure.
So the tugboats would have been with this ship for a little bit, but not all the way to this is about 4 miles out, I think, from the port, right?
Yeah, I'm told that the tugboats were released 17 minutes before the incident. So ideally, those tugboats would have gone through the bridge. But there's enormous pressure from these shipping companies because as these ships have grown in size, the tugboats have grown in size and complexity. So it's really expensive to have these tugboats standing by and not doing anything. So the shipping companies often press back and say, hey, we don't want tugs. And on the pilots in the port as well, because there's always the threat with these shipping companies. If you charge us too much money with all these safety regulations, we're just going to go to the port of New York or Savannah or somewhere else where the restrictions are less. So often these safety regulations at different ports play against each other, and the safety of the citizens is what's left at risk.
Some of the images we've seen today of this ship, which is known as the Dali, flying under a Singaporean flag, some of the images show that it does have an anchor that is dropped. We don't know when the anchor dropped, do we? And is it customary if you lose power to try and throw the anchor to stop the ship? Would that have been a customary move?
Absolutely. There were two incidents where bridges were hit before, the Tampa Skyway Bridge back in 1980, which was catastrophic and many people died, similar to this one. And then about 15 years ago, there was the Costa Busan hit the Bay Bridge in Oakland. It was coming in fog and misjudged, and the pilot overrode the vessel traffic service. But one of the things that came out in there is, well, if there was confusion, why didn't they just anchor? So, pilots know that if they're in trouble, they should anchor. But the problem is they were already too close to the bridge to be able to safely anchor.
Yes.
So my belief is if they did it before, which I hope they did, it was just an effort to slow down the ship so there's less force into that. They had already decided they're probably going to hit. Just let's try to reduce that force. Or after they hit, it's standard procedure. When you have a collision, you drop the anchor. We're not sure which it is.
I do see some reporting today. Sky News says that the Dali ship dropped its anchors as a part of an emergency proceeding before crashing into the Francis Scott Key Bridge, according to the Singapore Port Authority. That's the report as of this afternoon. So if that's the case, I do wonder, watching the video, you see the ship almost swing towards the column of the bridge. Is it possible that anchoring could have led to that action, that the ship swung as a result of the anchor tugging on it?
Well, the anchor is tricky in this scenario. So first of all, you have to have a crew up there and they're ready to lower the anchor, but you have to know how deep that water is. So if you don't drop it far enough, it's not going to touch the bottom. If then from touching the bottom to 3 times the water depth, the anchor will just bounce on the bottom. And the maneuverability of the ship, the center of pivot, it's normally around where the house is. But if you drop that anchor just to touch the bottom, the pivot goes all the way to the bow. So the ship does become a lot more maneuverable and swing. And then if you drop it more than 3 times the water depth, that chain starts to lay out and it digs in. You don't want to do that if you're going this fast, if you're going 8 knots, because if that anchor digs in, when you're going at that speed, you could rip the whole bow out or at least the winch.
Yep. And then finally, and thank you, by the way, for all of your expertise here. This is very valuable to us, John Konrad. If you've, for these bridges, I sitting here as just an amateur thinking about all of this, I was wondering why there weren't more barriers of some kind before a bridge could actually reach the column, the support column that holds up an entire bridge. Is it your experience that there are some more modern bridges, for instance, that do have barriers kind of in the intervening space so that a ship can't make it quite as far as to hit the main structural column?
Absolutely, and that's what we saw with the Costa Busan. It hit the Oakland Bay Bridge, and there was no damage to the bridge. It tore a giant rip down the side of the ship, which spilled a lot of oil into the bay, but the bridge wasn't damaged itself because of a much larger concrete footprint around those columns. So larger bridges like the Bay Bridge or the Golden Gate or the Verrazano, they will have much larger concrete, sections. And that, that'll stop the ship before it hits into the steel. The problem here was that bow kind of, all that force is going right in that top lip of that bow section, which overhung the concrete and hit right into the steel. But the question is then with infrastructure, we've had a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill. Out of that, Secretary Pete has approved less than $1 billion for all of the ports. So this is less than 1% of all the infrastructure. The amount going to electric buses is at least 4 times the amount going to all the ports, all the harbors in the entire nation. So if you were to build these, structures around the bridge, you would also have to potentially dredge the canal or build a bigger bridge. And we saw this with the Bayonne Bridge in New York, where they spent billions of dollars to raise it up. Well, a lot of that money was spent or was pushed on the local taxpayers in Newark because the federal government, the Maritime Administration, particularly under Pete Buttigieg, is broken and has been torn apart over the years. So the FAA has 40 to 45,000 employees. The Maritime Administration, MARAD, which sits right next to the FAA and under Pete Buttigieg, it only has 800 employees, and half of them work at the Merchant Marine Academy. So even if they got on the ball and they wanted to do more to spend on, as this infrastructure team, they wanted to spend more on the dredging and the bridge abutments and the ports, they don't have the personnel to handle these projects.
Yeah.
And Congress does not have a major compunction to fix this. A few congressmen do. Congressman Garamendi, a Democrat, and Waltz, a Republican, are two that are fighting for a bigger stake of this infrastructure bill. But we spent all this money and it's not going, and it's not just here, but you see the Mississippi River is drying up and we can't dredge it, and there are problems around the country.
So you said that the infrastructure package spends 4 times as much on electric vehicles as it does on ports and infrastructure there?
At least. And I'm talking ports and maritime infrastructure for the entire nation. This includes Hawaii, Alaska, the rivers, the waterway systems.
Yes,
it's been less than $1 billion. So electric buses have gotten a lot more subsidies.
Yeah, and they're way more useless. The ports are more critical. The bridges are more critical. Thank you very much. John Konrad, CEO of G-Captain. Really appreciate your expertise today and your time. Thank you so much for joining us. To the phones we go. Matt calling in from Rockville, line 2. Matt, good afternoon. You're on the Vince Colonnese Show.
Hey,
Matt. Good, sir.
So we, my best gal and I, as Chris Plant would say, we live about a mile from the bridge. We live in Glen Burnie, and we woke up. My girlfriend always checks like the neighborhood app, and she said, "Did anyone hear anything?" And they posted around 150, and so we didn't think that it was real. We turned the news on, and sure enough, it was. But the reason I wanted to call was everyone's saying the Port of Baltimore, blah blah blah. The position of the bridge is basically as you're coming in from the Chesapeake, it's the first bridge that you hit. So after the Bay Bridge, it's the first bridge you hit going up towards the harbor. Most of the ports and industrials and all of the places that are unloading cars and farm equipment, all of that is on the other side of the bridge. There's only a couple things on this side of the bridge, meaning as they're building it, it's going to completely decimate this. And some of the numbers I've been reading, roughly 15,000 jobs just in the immediate area and 140,000 plus that are somehow linked to this. This is just going to decimate the entire supply chain.
Yes, it's going to have an immense effect. Right now we're, of course, dealing with just the fallout from the bridge itself, the lives lost, the just where are the people? That's the question right now. They say there's 6 people still missing. We just heard from Maryland authorities. Governor Wes Moore didn't indicate one way or the other whether or not vehicular traffic was actually still on the bridge at the time of the collapse. He said an investigation is underway, but as we find out more details, we'll share them with you. And as Matt points out, the long-term effects of this, I think we're only beginning to contemplate. This is a big deal. This is a big deal for the whole country. Stay with us. Jenny Terre joining us in mere moments. We'll talk about the state of our country's borders.